Good morning, everyone. It's Wednesday, March 24th, and we have two items. This is a meeting of the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, and we've got two items that we're taking up today. The first is our work on tech transfer and entrepreneurship from our federal lab and university ecosystem, and then the second is a small business funding appropriation. So we're going to start with the focus on how we generate economic impact from our federal labs. And we've got a terrific lineup today of our partners in the economic development space. And we'll ask them to turn on their cameras as we walk, as we approach this. And Jean has prepared a framework for the meeting. We've been working together. And there's a little bit of information in the packet. There'll be more information coming forth as we follow up on this. I view today's conversation as, a next step in what has been an ongoing development process of some new ideas and program initiatives. We're kind of doing a more comprehensive check-in on some of the bigger picture issues and opportunities and building towards a budget strategy for this spring and a policy strategy for ongoing. So, I want to start by saying the county has been facing a lot of headwinds from an economic development perspective. And we as a county have always historically been part of a region where the economic pie was fairly divided third between Northern Virginia, DC, and Maryland. And that has changed over time. Over the past 30 years, DC has had a renaissance. Northern Virginia has entered a phase of hyper growth fueled by a huge influx of money from the defense sector, particularly, but also the state's very smart investments in transportation and certain other infrastructure. And at the same time as DC was having its renaissance and Montgomery and Virginia was investing in its growth and having federal funds that were flowing in, Montgomery County was facing a decline of investment in the NIH as a result of federal, basically federal budget strategy that really tamped down on health growth in research. And the county, I think, really experienced a lot of consequences from that. So I could say since my time at the county council, we've been through a lot of different topical focuses in how we can build our economic development, from small business to chasing Amazon. But the lesson that we see from communities that are succeeding out there with really strong metropolitan economies is a lot of times they build on research presence in their communities, whether that is Boston building on Harvard and MIT and so on, or the Bay Area building on Stanford and Berkeley and so on. And we don't have a university in our boundaries. We have one right next door, which is highly relevant, and we need to build on the University of Maryland. We have the universities at Shady Grove, we have Montgomery College, but we have something that most communities would, absolutely love to have, which is NIH and FDA and NIST, HHS, energy. We have incredible institutions that have access to tremendous resources for research. And those institutions are the fountain of many of our economic success stories. A lot of the companies that are creating jobs in this county, that are driving our economy, are indeed spinning out or licensing technology that was invented at NIST or NIH, National Cancer Institute, you name it. So the topic that I have been focused on in my role since taking over as chair of this committee has been, how can we build on that foundation? How can we invest in that strength and make something bigger that will drive our prosperity going forward? And I know this has been a missing piece in the county for a really long time. It's been one that we had hoped to get to, but didn't. And September of 2019, the committee convened a forum, thanks to the support of the NCCOE. We convened a very constructive forum to talk about tech transfer, and we had NIH, and we had TEDCO from the state, and we had private sector, entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial leaders. We had academic voices, and I think we really set in motion what has been a very constructive conversation leading to new investments, new programs, and new ideas. When I took over as chair of the committee, the county was ending its funding relationship with PHI. I thought that was very problematic, and I worked really hard with the executive branch and PHI and my colleagues to restore that funding. And now we have, again, a very strong and growing partnership with PHI, and we're going to hear more about that today. And in the course of my research on the issues, I found some work by Brian Darmody, and Brian's going to join us today. He had worked with Rich Bendis and the Maryland Life Sciences Advisory Board and produced a report about how the county could better leverage the innovation that is happening in our federal labs. And I thought Brian really laid out some very clear, a very clear roadmap for the kind of issues that we need to be working on. So I'm pleased that we're going to hear more about Brian's continuing work with BHI and Rich Bendis. And at the same time, we are really lucky that Ben Wu has taken over NCCOE, and he's brought in a stellar team as well. So joining Christy Blake, who organized the panel that we had, is Brad Stewart, a life sciences sector entrepreneur, and Phil Singerman. And Phil Singerman, who I've known for years, has been at NIST. He was a top federal policymaker in this area, locally, but also nationally. And he is now working with NCCOE. And so we've got an all-star team, and we're going to hear today about some of the ideas that our team has been developing as part of this program. And we're going to talk just about how we can kind of build on that and what kind of programs we might be able to get into place, either expand or add in order to really strengthen our innovation economy here. So that's my overview. And Gene, I think you've kind of given us a structure. Do you recommend that we start with PHI or NCCOE? And we'll be seeing materials today as a follow-up. We'll post those. I'm sure we'll get some presentations. And so we'll pull all the documents together so that we can kind of share them going forward. So again, we're joined by Ben Wu, Phil Singerman, Brad Stewart, Christy Blake, Rich Bendis, Brian Darmody. And I'm glad you're here. So Gene, why don't you start?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Reamer. You've done a great overview, so we'll go ahead and get in case the IT staff have not turned on screen sharing, in case any of our colleagues want to share screens, we'll go ahead and do that now. And then I agree we can have Mr. Bendis from BHI and Mr. Darmody present their information. And certainly the committee can have open discussion around that information with BHI and NCCOE. And then following that presentation and discussion, we can see NCCOE's presentation and continue an open discussion. So with that, I'll go ahead and let Mr. Bendis and Mr. Darmody present their information.
Great.
Thank you, Gene. But by the way, are you going to be able to share screen on the slides we had prepared, Gene?
Oh, yeah, and I'm going to put those together.
Okay, thank you.
And we're asking Equin if you could please allow our presenters here, each of them, to have share screen. That way they can.
Screen sharing privileges are enabled.
Thank you.
I think we had discussed that Gene was going to share. Thank you. Load up for us because we don't have that many. But Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be able to appear before you today. Give you a few updates on, I think, some good progress that's happening in the county. And one of the things that's not on the slides that I'd like to discuss is that while Council Member Reamer basically talked about Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia and some progress they're making, I'd like to just very briefly highlight some successes in Montgomery County from last year as well as early this year that are very positive and promising, and I will be glad to send this information to you later. But JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, does an update on the region and the economic growth around biohealth on a regular basis, and we just got a copy of their updated, somewhat first quarter report for what's happening in the what we call the biohealth capital region, which was Maryland, DC, and Virginia, but heavily weighted by Montgomery County in Maryland, since a high concentration of the assets in biohealth are located in Montgomery County. So, and while that data isn't able to be shared on the screen with you, I'm just going to highlight a few things with you. You know, one of the major things that happened in 2020 was Project Warp Speed, which provided funding to companies that were able to potentially address the pandemic and COVID-19. And with that, Montgomery County became somewhat of an epicenter in the world to help address that. And Project Warp Speed had about $16 billion with the initial distribution of funds, and over $6 billion of that came into one county in the United States, which was Montgomery County. And it went to Emergent, Novavax, GlaxoSmithKline, and AstraZeneca. And there were a number of other companies in the state of Maryland, 40 in total, that were engaged in some aspect of therapeutics, vaccines, or diagnostics, and a high concentration of them in Montgomery County. So that is very important for us to know that we're being recognized as one of the leading counties in the world to help address this pandemic.
Well, Rich, let me pause you there, because you're right. I think I buried the lead here. I think that what you're saying is proving the point, you know, that this is the focus area for us to have maximum impact. And we have been putting this policy agenda back into the county's, you know, top priority area. And then along came the pandemic, and we're seeing huge federal investment and huge private sector investment and progress. And I think it demonstrates why this is the area that we need to be, you know, in. And I think it shows what the opportunities are for the coming future. So absolutely. Thank you for always doing the best job, you know, espousing why this county is where it is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, just to reinforce that very briefly, and I'll get into the federal interaction. Another indicator of robustness in the economy is initial public offerings in this industry, the biohealth industry. And it's amazing. The first 3 months of this year, there are 12 IPOs in Maryland, and 10 of them are going to be in Montgomery County. And last year, there was about $1 billion in venture capital throughout the whole biohealth capital region. In the first 3 months of this year, there's been $1 billion of investment in venture capital in the biohealth capital region, heavily concentrated in Montgomery County. All of those are very positive indicators from a financing standpoint. And the other thing is wet lab space. As you know, there's been a shortage of wet lab space throughout the whole region and specifically in Montgomery County. And in talking to developers, we're hearing about 3 million new square feet in the state of Maryland, of which there will be over 1 million square feet of new wet lab space emerging in Montgomery County over the next 12 months. So all of these are very positive indicators, and I just want everybody to know that the county is somewhat on a roll related to the biohealth and life science industry, and it's unfortunate that we've had the pandemic, but it's actually shining a light on the quality of the assets, companies, entrepreneurs, and resources we have in the county. So I'll stop with that introduction and provide some of that data to Gene and other members later on that from a JLL, but I'll just give you a little brief update on biohealth innovation and federal engagement that we've been involved with. And again, I want to thank the county for re-engaging with us. We appreciate that. We value the partnership and think it's very important for our mission as well as the economic growth of the county. One of our major cornerstone programs is Entrepreneurs in Residence, which we created as a program with the National Institute of Health. And that started all the way back in 2012, where EIRs are employed on the BHI payroll, supported by NIH funding to go back in and support NIH-funded companies. And normally the reason they do that is because they can't afford the talent or the expertise that you would find in the private sector to get involved in the federal government. It's been a very effective program, so effective that in the last 4 months, we've grown from 4 to 8 EIRs with the National Institute of Health. And so we now have 8 plus 1 venture analyst, 9 people in partnership with the NIH and that are helping support companies through the that they fund through the SBIR or Small Business Innovation Research Program. The other thing is that we have a contract with the county. Thank you to the Fed committee and the council members with 2 primary initiatives. One of those is with the number of postdocs that we have that are highly educated working at the NIH or universities within Montgomery County and the region. A lot of them would like to engage and find jobs within industry or potentially entrepreneurial companies, but it's difficult to get that matching between people looking for jobs that have some talent and companies that may be interested in hiring them. And so we're experimenting on trying to expand a postdoc entrepreneurial program that we started about 5 years ago with one of an NCI, National Cancer Institute researcher, Anthony Sala, and basically he ended up doing half time with us and half with National Cancer Institute, and then ultimately became full-time after determining he wanted to get into the entrepreneurial side of the world rather than the bench scientist world. He's actually led one company that we helped land from the Netherlands as the managing director, and he created a new company out of science that he was doing primary research with at the National Cancer Institute called Miracule. It's headquartered in Gaithersburg. They have about 10 employees now, and it's raised private capital and several $1 million of non-dilutive funding from the NIH and federal agencies through the SBIR program. So it's an ideal model of what we'd like to expand upon to identify postdocs that are working within academic institutions or the NIH that would like to get some entrepreneurial experience. And now we are working with some additional NCI postdocs who are shadowing our EIRs and our team at BHI to get experience to determine whether or not it's the life that they may be interested in exploring. So thank you for that ability to create that program with the county to see how many people we can retain and create some new businesses around.
Rich, just to comment that you have with the postdoc program, I think I've heard the number 9,000 postdocs at NIH, something like that. A huge workforce of scientists, and to be able to tap into that talent and connect it to the private sector here is potentially very impactful.
Yeah, there's thousands of them, but the gap that exists is that industry is looking for people with experience. And if they don't have the experience, it's very hard to go right from a postdoc position to get into industry. So there has to be some type of a buffer or intermediary position to get them some business experience. And then they're going to be much more desirable to industry. And that's what we found by doing some workshops with industry, is that it's very hard to take a raw postdoc and embed them within AstraZeneca or GSK or another company. But it's good if you can get some training for them before they would be eligible to go into one of those companies. So that's another opportunity for us to explore within the county.
Rich, just real quick, what's the name of that company you said that you just mentioned that's in Gaithersburg?
Mirecule, Mirecule.
Okay.
And they were sharing a space and just expanded their space within an Alexandria real estate property. So they just doubled their size and are adding to their team. And a lot of that is through their success in getting non-dilutive funded from the federal government, which is an extremely important tool for early stage companies.
I thought they were at 704 Quince Orchard.
Yeah, Quince Orchard Road, right.
That's okay. That's Alexandria, 704.
Well, yeah, it's a partnership between Shear and Alexandria. Alexandria basically financed it, and Shear helped develop it.
Got it.
Yeah, and so they were sharing a space with a Dutch company that we had helped land in Montgomery County, Memetis, and now Memetis expanded their space, and Mirecule took on some new space in the same building to expand. The chairman basically mentioned the Life Science Advisory Board, which is Governor Hogan's LSAB, and a number of people participate on that board. And one of the things they've tried to identify is, with all of the federal agencies and institutes we have in the state, how do we basically get greater return on investment from those resources that are in the state as well as in the county is identified. Two primary, I'm on that Life Science Advisory Board and had the privilege of being the chair of their legislative committee. And about 2 to 3 years ago, the Small Business Innovation Research Program was up for reauthorization, and the LSAB became very supportive of that, as well as other members nationally around the country, and worked with our congressional delegation in Maryland. It was reauthorized, which is extremely important to all of small businesses that want to take advantage of that non-dilutive funding. The other program that we were working on was something to look at how to modify the conflict of interest policy, which has become very prohibitive in encouraging investors and companies to work with scientists and researchers within federal agencies and at the NIH. And that's a little more challenging of an issue. It's one we're continuing to work on. Some people feel it does not require any congressional movement to modify that. It might be interagency or interinstitute policy, which may loosen up this to encourage the institutes to work with outside, more effectively than they are today. But there was a conflict of interest problem about 12 years ago, and they went 180 degrees in the wrong direction to make it much more difficult. Phil Singerman, who has been in the federal government for a long time in NIST, recognizes what happened at that time. And I think there's probably some middle ground that we can move to, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight and will require a lot of education, which we're still focused on. Next, the non-dilutive funding, you've heard me mention it several times, is that the SBIR program, for those that are not familiar, is about a $4 billion federal program. Any federal agency that has over $100 million research budget has to allocate about 3% of their funds for small businesses to be able to apply and compete for grants that would be eligible for high-risk early-stage research, stuff that venture capitalists traditionally wouldn't fund. And the NIH, for example, has about $1.2 billion. Next to DOD, it's the second largest in SBIR funding, and that is the institute that would be most important for people in the life science or the biohealth space. What we have done at BHI ever since we've been created, almost over the last 9 years, has been assisting companies in a pre-proposal to help them put more competitive proposals together before they apply with these federal agencies. We've worked with 177 different proposals, and we've had a 50% win rate. The national average win rate for people applying for SBIRs is 21%. The challenge that we have is that with a small team and a small budget, there's only so many companies that we can support, and we do have a contract with Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, specifically working on assisting Montgomery County companies in being more progressive with SBIR proposals. It's a good partnership, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about a 3-day webinar we just had last week in partnership with NCCOE and some of the results of that, which have been very positive for the county. And of course, it was held virtually. Lastly, on this sheet, there has been discussion about how can we be proactive to identify future pandemics and be proactive in trying to prevent them to getting the stage to where this COVID-19 pandemic has evolved. And what's evolved in the last 12 months by working with another organization in Washington, D.C., Connected DMV, is the potential creation of a global pandemic prevention and biodefense center, which would work on initiatives to address being proactive from a vaccine perspective, diagnostic, therapeutics, PPE, social equity in distribution of vaccines, but having a nonprofit organization that could be an intermediary to interact with all of the federal agencies, universities, industry, and foundations to be proactive in trying to identify and address future pandemics. Montgomery County is very interested in helping support this, and there is some pending funding of $500,000 that I know a contract is being negotiated between the county and Connected DMV, the nonprofit, that would go towards a planning initiative over the next 6 months for the formation of this center. And it has already been identified that there's probably only one logical location for a headquarters for this center, and it should be Montgomery County, having the FDA, NIH, all of the companies that have been addressing vaccine production, research and development, diagnostics, and therapeutics that we have in our county. So we're hoping that maybe before the end of this month that might occur. The state of Maryland is financially supporting it. The Gates Foundation is financially supported. A number of industry partners are, and we think it's an ideal private-public partnership that also reinforces Montgomery County being the epicenter related to vaccine development, manufacturing, and production. And it would be great to have this located as a headquarters within the county.
Absolutely.
So, I'll go to the next one, Gene. And if there's any questions on any of that.
Why don't you go back? Yeah, thank you. We'll just quickly touch on these and then we'll keep rolling. So great report. Thank you. Pleased by your continuing to expand the Entrepreneur in Residence program and the postdoc program. I think there's just so much potential there. We really need to focus on the conflict of interest policy, based on particularly, I know that you had been involved, but based particularly on Brian's work and also Phil and others identifying issues here. That was one of my high priorities for our contract with you, and I'm glad that that's part of your program. And we're going to need to follow up and over the course of the next year or two conduct some federal outreach and other engagement. We're going to hear more about that in a bit, but this needs to be a priority area for the county. It's a long-term policy priority for us to change some of the rules that limit the impact of our labs here. And we can get a lot more impact from the federal investments if we could address some of these policies constraints. So we have kind of a disproportionate interest, and we ought to provide, I think, leadership on the area in that area because we have just so much riding on it. Appreciate your work in the SBIR funding. I think we have more work to do, so we're going to take that up this spring in the budget process. How we can expand some of our work to help our companies access the SBIR program. And on the Pandemic Center, again, glad you're here. Grateful that you're in this sector and able to develop these ideas. As everyone knows, I had worked with my colleagues and the county executive to introduce an appropriation back in January. It has moved way too slow. Been frustrated. It's almost the end of March, and we still don't have a signed document. But I understand, talking with the parties, that is expected imminently, and so we can start moving forward. Meanwhile, as you said, the Gates Foundation and the state is moving forward. So we should be able, hopefully, to roll this out the door, or at least our participation in it, very soon. Great. Keep going, Rich. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll try to move through this to keep it moving. And then we had talked about the federal engagement and a project that Brian Darmody, who is the CEO of the Association of University Research Parks, which is a national trade association around research parks and universities, and headquartered up in College Park. And Brian was a long-term University of Maryland senior executive and has a great deal of background in working with public policy and economic development within the state of Maryland and within the region. So he had identified that there was a program with the Federation of American Scientists who were looking for proposals from anybody in the United States, and they called it a day one project. And what could be done working with the federal government to establish more partnership or opportunities and to help stimulate potentially stimulate the economic growth of the United States. So he primarily took the lead in putting a draft together that we worked on to come up with some recommendations. The title being Empowering the Federal Laboratory System for Better Technology Commercialization, Economic Development, and International Competitiveness. And there are 4 primary areas that we're focused on in this paper. And rather than me just read that to you, I'm going to let Brian take a lead and go through these 4 points. And you'll also recognize his passion for what he has in this paper as well as this initiative. So, Brian, you can take the lead on our recommendations.
Thanks, Rich, and thank you, committee members. I'm Brian Darmody. I am a past Montgomery County resident. I grew up in Four Corners and lived there till I was about 25 when I was at the University of Maryland, and then met my wife and moved to the Baltimore area. But I've always remained passionate about helping Montgomery County, but also the federal labs. I grew up, near Naval Research Lab where it closed, and then FDA headquarters moved in there. So I've been passionate about how can we use federal labs. And as Rich said, I worked at the University of Maryland for many years, and I think there are a lot of parallels to what universities did in becoming centers of innovation, and how federal labs have many of the same assets. They don't have as much flexibility. And so I've been pushing, for 15 years, 20 years, I've been talking to the Federal Lab Consortium and others on giving increased flexibility to federal lab managers to sort of treat them like research universities. As Hans said, any state in the union would die to have the world's largest biomedical institution in their state. And, to some extent, I think we take the presence of NIH and a lot of federal labs for granted. But if you had an Amazon-like competition, you can imagine how many billions of dollars states would throw out to have an entity like NIH in their state or their county. Anyway, so I have been, preaching this, but there has never been a legislative vehicle to kind of give a comprehensive legislative vehicle. What's happened is as you probably know in Congress, different committees have different authorities over like Department of Energy labs and a different authority for USDA labs. So there's never been a comprehensive approach to giving more flexibility to federal labs until, thanks to NIST. Bill was at NIST when they started the Return on Investment program. That led the LSAB and for me to write the paper on conflict of interest that we submitted to NIST in the Return on Investment program. And to NIST's credit, they put together a package of reforms that they presented to the waning days of the last Congress. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be considered by the incoming Biden administration to give some of these reforms to federal labs. And what the Day One project that I wrote with Rich's help really says, let's take those return on investment reforms, but just let's tweak them a little bit in 3 areas: place, talent, and innovation. And those are the 3 areas that universities look at in building, research parks. And the way my association, we're a global nonprofit. We have members in 42 states. A lot of research universities, but we have federal lab research parks as members. Sandia Labs in New Mexico, it has a research park outside its Department of Energy lab. Falcon Hill Research Park in Utah is an Air Force base that has a research park adjacent to it. We have many members that have federal labs that have research parks or innovation districts attached to them. Not in Maryland because of differing authorities. And so what the Day One project on empowering the federal lab system is really to say, let's give all federal labs authority. Doesn't mandate, doesn't require, it says let's give them authority. And using analogies to what research universities did when they built their research parks. So the return on investment needs to be supported, and that can be the vehicle to sort of finally get, working with the Maryland Congressional District delegation. But I would argue we need to have a national approach. We can't just say this is great for Maryland. We really need to have a national approach. And my association, since we are in 42 states, we have many members that are interested in this topic. We can help, push this along as long as we have some supporters from Congress, like the Maryland Congressional Delegation. So the 3 additional things would be develop place partnerships with universities and private sector, something called the Enhanced Use Lease Authority. That DOD labs have that currently. Some NASA centers have this. That's why you have the Jet Propulsion Lab at NASA, and a few other places have these authorities, but not everyone. So this would allow federal agencies to lease their land to the private sector for better public-private partnerships. And let me just draw one quick analogy to this. You may not know this, but NIST developed its quantum computing labs at the University of Maryland College Park. It wasn't under an Enhanced Use Lease Authority, but we jointly developed with NIST these quantum computing labs back in the, was it the 2018 recession, I think? In any event, that helped build the quantum computing talent at both NIST and College Park. And you may have read there's a new company called IonQ. It's going to be hopefully the first pure quantum computing initiative that was created through the private sector. That effort really, NIST, it was a public-private partnership with NIST, and NIST should take some credit for this spin-out that's going to be valued at $2 billion. That's B with a billion. And it's going to be headquartered in probably College Park. It has a relationship with Duke University. I don't like to mention that, but regardless, that's an example of how you take something outside the gates of the federal lab and how you can spin something out and build, in this case, a quantum computing publicly traded company. So that's giving authority to federal labs to use their land. Could you have a NIST research park Did you have a, I don't know. They haven't seemed to have a lot of land, but that would be a great thing. You could have a quantum computing center there. The second issue that we've talked a lot about is conflict of interest. And I know this because when I was at the University of Maryland, I was in the legal office. This was shortly after the Bayh-Dole Act. We built an incubator. We recruited a company from Rutgers, a professor, and he had his own company. And the legal office told me, oh, he can't bring his company into the incubator because that's a conflict of interest. He owns that company, and the state conflict of interest laws would forbid that. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, don't we want faculty startups to be in our incubator? I mean, this seems crazy. And so I said, and he said, well, state conflict of interest laws, which were written back when Spiro Agnew had been, right after Spiro Agnew was governor, and it, basically said, no, if you're a state employee, you can't have any, financial interest in a state contract. Well, the Bayh-Dole Act passed. Faculty were given authority to own, to get royalties from federally sponsored research. So the state ethics law had never been updated to conform to the Bayh-Dole Act, but also to the fact that universities were creating incubators and wanted spin-outs to be developed there. So I went to our state legislature and tried to amend the conflict of interest law in the first year. They laughed at me. They said, no, we can't have that. So the next year I went with the Montgomery County Technology Council. I brought the private sector and they said, no, this makes sense. We should do this. And eventually we had to amend the state conflict of interest law. So there's now a separate category that says, okay, universities, you can manage conflict of interest, but you have to have disclosure. These rules have to be approved by the Office of Attorney General. It has to be managed. And, I could give you a copy of the legislation. On the federal side, if you read the Stevenson-Wilder Act on this issue, it says, federal researchers can get royalties, just like they followed the analogy to with public university employees. But it says, if the conflict of interest rules don't work out, tell Congress and that's how we'll fix it. Well, as far as I know, no federal lab has ever asked Congress to fix their conflict of interest rules because, I work for the federal government. I work for the Healthcare Financing Administration. That's just never going to happen. Because then you have to get approval of your secretary and there are all kinds of questions. So rather than, specify a specific reform for NIH or for NIST or whomever, I sort of come around to the conclusion that we need a high-profile study of this, looking at best practices of what universities do. Because with universities, some states, they had to change their state constitution to allow faculty to have an interest in, a startup company. We didn't have to do that in Maryland, but that shows you have to get into this pretty deeply. So our idea is to commission an entity called the National Academy of Public Administration. It's a congressionally chartered think tank to study best practices in managing conflict of interest among researchers, working with the private sector and the higher ed sector. And the Office of Government Ethics is really the controller here of this. So thanks to Phil, we had a conversation about this, and I thought it was the Office of Personnel Management. So the Office of Government Ethics is kind of, they hold all of the cards here. And so there would have to be a study and perhaps statutory reforms or maybe not. I don't know. It's a complicated issue, but it's one, as Hans said, it's really important. And we need to, rather than just say we can't have any conflict of interest, most universities recognize there will be conflict of interest, but it has to be managed, approved, and disclosed. And all of these things that are done with states, let's draw some analogies on the federal side. So that's the possible resolution on the conflict of interest rules. The third is to give, as I mentioned, innovation. So most universities, if you look at it, the tech commercialization activities of universities, it's not done through the university itself. They have technology intermediaries. I mean, one example is WARF, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, very famous, warfarin, and a lot of the synthesis of vitamin D. Lots of things have come out of WARF, but it's not part of the University of Wisconsin. It's an affiliated organization. Virginia Patents is another one. Just about every university has an affiliated foundation to take on the business of tech commercialization, or even the business of research parks. I mean, I represent research parks. Very seldom is it actually done by the universities. For example, you probably read there's a $300 million new project here at College Park in the University of Maryland Discovery District. It's done through the Terrapin Development Corporation. It's not done through the university. So giving authority to federal labs to do this kind of tech commercialization through an affiliated organization is the other thing that we're calling for. The NIST package, suggests this. There was a bill last year that gave this authority to Department of Energy labs. It even allows them to create for-profit entities and hold equity in startups and things like that. Again, it doesn't require it. It allows the federal lab to do that if they wish. And if you look at the model of what most research universities have done successfully, it is through these affiliated organizations. And we're suggesting, let's give the federal labs that similar kind of authority so that you can more efficiently create companies like the ones that Rich mentioned earlier in Montgomery County, but more importantly, we have to make this national, right? And so we need to give this authority to other federal agencies across the country if we want to pass this bill. And lastly, I'll say, I mean, if you look at what's going on in Congress, there's something called the Endless Frontiers Act, which talks about $10 billion increase for the National Science Foundation, and they're talking about setting up 10 $1 billion research centers across the country. And then there's a similar bill by Senator Coons from Delaware that's talking about creating these research centers across the country and creating more federal, university, private sector partnerships. Again, all of these things are moving in the direction I think Montgomery County is interested in, and we need, as a county, to be ready to jump on those initiatives. And perhaps if the NIST package doesn't move forward, link some of these ideas to some of those packages, because it's pretty clear that some large-scale initiatives to build a more robust technology-based economy in the United States is going to, go through Congress this year. And the things we're talking about here don't cost billions of dollars. These mostly just give authority to federal labs to leverage the already billions of dollars that are being spent on internal research. So anyway, those are the ideas, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Brian. I think we'll move forward with NCEDC, but you have put on the table a lot of terrific observations and opportunities, and there's a lot to work with here. So we'll come back to a fuller discussion, but now we're fortunate to have some of the nation's leading experts on these issues from the NIST perspective, particularly, but also just broadly joining us. So Ben, why don't I start off with you, and I'll let you'll share how you're going to proceed with your team.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you also to Councilman Juando and also Friedson for your interest in this issue. As you had mentioned, Mr. Chairman, the MCDC team has been engaged on looking at how we can support a federal engagement in order to support economic development. And we have a team that has been led by Christy Blake, Phil Sigerman, and also Brad Stewart. And I'll do a quick presentation about what we're looking at within MCDC, and then also allow Christy, Phil, and Brad also to weigh in with their initiatives and their input as well. So as you mentioned, in Montgomery County, the federal proximity and the federal agency presence is very significant. And we're home to 18 major federal agency headquarters, numerous satellite offices, and also the major research and educational institutions, as well as all of the ancillary support that flows from that presence. And being able to take advantage of this federal presence is a significant component of MCDC's economic strategy for Montgomery County. These are just a few of the agencies that have research programs that allow us to be able to collaborate, leverage federal assets and resources, and also to be able to help spawn new companies and new collaborations with these agencies that allow for company growth as well as innovation development. For MCDC, we're looking at federal engagement as a way to help support our local economic development. Our mission is to help attract, retain, and grow companies in Montgomery County. So we want to maximize Montgomery County's federal agency presence. We want to be able to help support these federal agencies, be able to fulfill their critical national mission, but also we want to help complement their mission with allowing local economic development to be enhanced by supporting business creation, facilitating technology transfer, and also to develop partnerships with a priority on 5 key areas that our team has tried to focus on. The first is to be able to support entrepreneurial success in early career professionals. The second is to leverage this laboratory proximity and to help drive more engagement with our federal presence. To create access to early stage capital for companies that are looking to engage with our federal partners. And the fourth is to initiate and match federal funding opportunities. And the fifth priority for us is to help strengthen this ecosystem of partnerships and collaboration. But we're also engaged in helping to support the federal technology transfer legislation and policy. Rich and Brian have mentioned some of the activities that have been undertaken, which they're helping to initiate. And for MCDC, we've also been helping to complement and support that priority and that promise of federal technology transfer as well for our local economic development partners. It was 1980, as had been mentioned, when both DOLE and Stevenson-Weidler passed Congress. And that was revolutionary because those legislations allowed for the federal government to be able to commercialize, to be able to spin off, and to be able to invite partners into what otherwise had been closed, the federal technology development space. And so agencies from NIH to NIST to FDA to NASA to DOE, all of these federal laboratories now had a chance to be able to complement their critical national mission by allowing for private sector companies to be able to partner with them and to be able to commercialize and potentially spin off new technologies. And this was really transformative. And back when I was working for Connie Morella, when she was the chair of the House Technology Subcommittee, she was able to introduce and I was help write the 2 significant pieces of legislation which updated and were creative, significant reforms to both DOLE and to Stevenson-Weidler. But there's still more work that needs to be done, and that's why the federal technology transfer legislation and policy is important, because by allowing for even greater enhanced opportunities for collaboration and technology licensing, that would benefit we believe, Montgomery County companies. And from Connie's priority when she was a member of Congress for technology transfer in our federal engagement back then, it still is the same today. And there's a greater urgency, perhaps even now, as we try to come back from the other side on this economic recovery for the pandemic. So we've been helping to support the NIST Green Paper, which is a benchmark which has been introduced to try to move forward with some of these federal tech transfer legislation and reforms. And we testified last month as the only economic development organization in the country to be able to speak in support of this legislative reform because of its impact to us as a local economic development organization. We've also been partnering with the Federal Laboratory Consortium in these efforts as well, and we'll continue to work with our Maryland congressional delegation to try to help support some of the legislative remedies that would help enhance the opportunities for greater collaboration and technology licensing. And of course, our friends over at BHI, the Tech Council, the Governor's Life Sciences Advisory Board, and the System of Maryland Colleges, the university system, to help support these efforts. But what we're focused on primarily is the impact of being able to not just support the federal legislative landscape, but also to be able to try to help bring the federal presence that we have down to companies and to be able to help support business growth. And so one of our first priorities is to create entrepreneurial success and early career professional development by cultivating this business growth and talent through our partnership working with TEDCO. We've been working to expand the NIST-funded NSTEP program. And also we're looking to explore how DOE has been using their LEAP model to help be able to bring that to other federal research laboratories in Montgomery County. DOLE Labs, they're GOCOs, the government-owned contractor operated, so they have greater flexibility than some of the GOGOs, the government-owned, government-operated laboratories like NIH and others. But there are ways potentially that we might be able to take this proven program and use it as a pilot to introduce to other laboratories as well. We also want to sustain and retain the talent pool for a workforce pipeline. We have, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, so many of the federal laboratory postdocs, fellows that come from not just all over the country, but all over the world. They come to Montgomery County, and we'd like to be able to retain this brain gain here in the county. So we want to build upon the work that we've done in developing a postdoc conference that can partner with NIH and NIST, among others. And we've done a career symposium this past year. We had to do it virtually, but we like to be able to sometime this year or in the near term to be able to have a physical congregation and a program and symposium that can help be able to retain some of these highly educated and highly talented folks into Montgomery County. And we also are looking to help explore a fellowship program with other federal agencies such as NCCOE as well. We also have a priority of trying to leverage our laboratory proximity and the engagement that we have with our federal laboratories. We want to be able to use these federal facilities to create connections, to be able to take advantage of the proximity for enhanced operation or opportunities for federal collaboration. For example, NCCOE, which is part of NIST, the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, they, when they were created by Senator Mikulski over almost close to a decade ago, they had under the senator's vision, not just a national mission, but also a local development mission as well. But NIST has been so focused on its national mission that they haven't been able to support a locally focused partnership strategy. And so they've asked us to help take on that responsibility for them and to be able to allow for NCCOE to have a greater connection to Montgomery County and Maryland cybersecurity companies and IT companies that can help support their critical national mission. And as you know, because of NSA, because of University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, and our educational institutions, we have a very strong concentration of cybersecurity companies in the state of Maryland that could be very helpful to NCCOE as it seeks to support its industry-led mission on trying to develop standards as well as the new technologies for cybersecurity as well as for information technology. Also, we want to be able to work directly and proactively with private sector companies that are looking to develop stronger connections and long-term relationships with federal laboratories. And they include supporting the opportunity for greater technology licensing through DOLE or through collaborative arrangements like CRADAs under the Stevenson-Weiler Authority. And taking the DOE CRADA model that has been mentioned is one option. And we also want to develop a stronger commercialization partnership with the federal laboratories through their offices of technology transfer as well. Our third priority is to be able to focus on creating access to early stage capital, to be able to develop entrepreneurship with funding, and to try to create that holistic approach to support entrepreneurship, innovation, and development and technology transfer in funding, as well as to help support the training of personnel and the connections that companies can have to federal agencies as well. And they include helping to support on the county level, the state level, and the federal SBIR assistance programs. Delegate Chi has a bill which passed last year, which allowed for the state to also create an SBIR assistance program modeled after what Montgomery County has been doing. And then also, what we want to do is to develop a technology transfer overlay to the work that MCDC is going to be undertaking for entrepreneurship and innovation. The county executive has indicated to us that this is a priority that he would like to have, and so we are going to be developing an MCDC entrepreneurship and innovation hub, and to also potentially incorporate that to help support the Montgomery County Business Incubator Network as well. And so what we would do is to, within this entrepreneur and innovation hub, is to be able to have technology transfer as a component of the work that we're doing within that hub as well, to be able to help support businesses and to be able to help new companies or people who have an entrepreneurial bent to be able to connect them with federal laboratories so that they may be able to take some of the existing federal technology off the shelf and commercialize it, or to spin off or collaborate with these federal laboratories in a way that could be useful for their research that would allow for new companies and new technologies to be developed. We also want to increase the access to capital programs, especially for inclusive growth for small minority and women-owned businesses. We're going to be undertaking within MCDC an inclusive economy initiative, and we also see how inclusive economy initiative plays well with the Entrepreneurial and Innovation Hub to make sure that all segments of Montgomery County's population can participate effectively with our county's growth. Our fourth initiative is to initiate and match federal funding opportunities, basically to create these collaborations that will allow us for cooperation for grants and programs. What we've seen with the congressional passage of the CARES Act and also the American Rescue Plan are a number of federal programs that are going to be coming down the pike that can be very helpful for economic development, as well as to be able to support our federal engagement strategy as well. We've seen how the Tech Council has been awarded through the CARES Act funding, which was just announced last week. And we want to support and have been supporting some of these grant applications. And we are looking to work together with our partners to be able to have a collaboration that will allow us to have a very attractive and effective grant application for these federal programs, and to be able to then take the federal funding and leverage that in a way that can support our local economic development. We just had an announcement also that TEDCO has received a program funding through SBA, and we're partnering with them to help support their grant that they received from SBA as well. So we'll continue to look for federal funding opportunities and to be able to cooperate with other programs and partners on these grants. And our fifth priority is to be able to strengthen the partnership and collaborations that we already have to work together to leverage all of our resources. And we've identified several target partners for these collaborative initiatives. In academia, the University System of Maryland, Montgomery College, which includes USM, includes USG, Montgomery College, and we're also discussing ways in which MCPS can be a partner in these efforts as well on the K through 12 area. Also, we want to be able to continue to work together towards greater successes with our county-based organizations such as BHI as well as the Tech Council. And then also the state organizations like TEDCO. We are redeveloping the relationship that we have with TEDCO in order to have greater partnerships to be able to tap into state funding and also to be able to work with TEDCO potentially to leverage some federal funding as well. There are some national organizations such as SSTI and IEDC that have been engaged in this space that we would look to help include as well in our efforts to leverage resources, and then also to work with our federal government agencies. NIH, FDA, NIST. NIST is the only federal agency and federal laboratory in the country with the express mission of working with industry. And also with the FLC, the Federal Laboratory Consortium, which represents the conglomeration of federal laboratories around the country. We are developing an MOU, which we will announce shortly, that will seek to create enhanced strategic alignments towards mutual goals. So we believe that by working together, by leveraging resources, we become stronger. And also, we can use all of these partners to be able to help support our primary mission of helping to drive local economic development, not just on the federal policy level, but to directly help support businesses and also the partnerships, the talent, and also the opportunities for collaboration. We're working additionally with Connected DMV, as Rich mentioned, and also the University System of Maryland, to not just support and establish a pandemic preparedness and biodefense center here in Montgomery County, but also to help support a regional quantum innovation center. Now, quantum is an area that we believe has great potential. Most of you have heard already about the opportunities that quantum presents, especially with quantum crescent that had been laid out in the Reach Advisors report. And so what we're looking to do is to be able to create a foundation which would allow us to be able to attract companies to help have companies make the investment and to have them locate in Montgomery County. And our proximity to NIST is very important. NIST has been a major player in the quantum innovation space, and they're one of the major reasons why the University Maryland at College Park has such a lead with academic institutions on the quantum space. Bill Phillips, Eric Cornell, who were there when I was over at NIST, they were Nobel Prize recipients because of quantum. And we see that the potential for the quantum intersection with life sciences in Montgomery County is where we can develop a niche that would allow us to be a major player in this nascent technology that will be so important for our nation's national security as well as economic security as well. We also want to coordinate the development of county, state, and federal efforts to help support NIST legislative proposals, such as the Green Paper, and to work with the congressional delegation as well as other organizations, Brian's group as well as Richard's group and others, to be able to reduce these commercialization barriers. Because while we had significant reform with statutory reforms that were done when I worked with Connie in Congress, there's still more that can be done that if we can relax some of these restrictions, will allow for even greater local economic development opportunities, especially with the GO-GOs. What we've seen with the GO-COs, with the DOE labs at Los Alamos, at Oak Ridge, and other locations with the DOE labs, their communities are driven by their federal presence. And if we are able to reduce some of these barriers for NIH, for FDA, and even NIST, then we believe that we might be able to unleash and untap the greater potential for opportunities for businesses to be able to work collaboratively with the federal laboratories. We also are looking to work with NIST and the University of Shady Grove to support and enhance IBBR presence in operation that will allow for our biotech companies to be able to work collaboratively with an academic model with licensing and commercialization opportunities. You had mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that in Montgomery County, we lack compared to some of the innovation districts around the country. We lack a four-year institution. And so IBBR can, at least within the life sciences space, might be able to be that commercialization research opportunity, working with postdocs as well as with graduate research students. So we want to be able to at least get our foot in the door in that sense, and then see how we might be able to develop that into a more robust research presence with graduates at school, or graduate students, as well as with postdocs as well. So our next steps that we want to undertake for federal engagement strategy on economic development includes just continuing to further engage with our wide variety of MCDC partners in this space. We also are looking to continue to seek federal funding for partnerships and grant potential. So we'll continue to work with our partners to help identify some of the federal funding components that we can potentially apply for and be able to utilize effectively to be able to leverage these federal resources, and also to help leverage state resources through TEDCO and through the Governor's Relief Act, or whatever legislation the General Assembly is able to enact and have the Governor sign into law before they adjourn sine die next month. We also want to help build greater collaborative connections between industry and federal laboratories. And that's that connective tissue that MCDC can play for businesses is one that we're eager to undertake. And we also believe that we need to continue to market our federal assets to be able to let not just regionally and locally, but also let the country as well as the world know about our federal presence. And so there is being undertaken a marketing and branding campaign that MCDC will be looking at from holistically from an economic development perspective. But one of those components of that campaign will certainly be our ability to market our federal assets as well. So that's, in a nutshell, what MCDC is looking at, a little bit more focused than Rich and Brian, but more directed towards how we can support local economic development, the talent, the partnerships, and innovation growth. So I want to turn it over to Christy to let her talk a little bit about some of the things that she's been working on. And Christy's been there since the very beginning, working with you before I arrived, and Phil and Brad and I arrived, and so she's seen it from the very beginning as this has evolved. And then Phil, as you know, is an expert on technology transfer, had been the first director for TEDCO, and most recently retired as the head of the innovation initiatives for NIST. And then Brad Stewart, who's our senior vice president for business development, has been a real leader on the policy space, as well as being a life sciences executive who understands what businesses want from the federal government, from the county, and also what MCDC we can help provide to help nurture this ecosystem. So with that, let me turn it over to Christy.
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much, Ben. I just wanted to highlight a couple of, details on some of the work that we're doing. And I'll start specifically with the work that we're doing with the postdoc community. This past October 2020, we partnered with the Maryland Tech Council to provide a postdoc track as part of their annual conference. And what we're doing moving forward is continuing those conversations with the Maryland Tech Council, but we've also been engaged with the Office of Intramural Training and Education at NIH to work with them on an upcoming seminar on careers in bioscience. We're in the preliminary planning stages of that event, but we're also working on that with colleagues from NIST and from TEDCO. And the reason why we're working with our colleagues from NIST is because the NIH will be opening up that program to non-NIH postdocs, so it will be inclusive. Also, regarding the work with early career stage professionals and entrepreneurs, Ben mentioned our ideas and our thoughts on moving forward with trying to do the pilot programs for the InStep and the LEAP programs. And I know that Phil has had some preliminary conversations with the folks at TEDCO and at DOE about our potential with developing those pilot programs. And so following those preliminary conversations, we're working on an action plan, any appropriate partners, and then any potential funding that might be needed for piloting those programs. With regard to SBIR, we're also working on, I'm looking back at some data on SBIR engagement from Montgomery County companies to see, just to get a better overview of what it looks like from a Montgomery County perspective on which companies in which industries are getting SBIR grants, and identifying to see if there are any potential ways that we can continue to help expand that program so that we can reach more companies and more entrepreneurs through that. Also additionally, as Ben said, we're working on, and Phil and I are working in partnership on this, so maybe after I talk a little bit about this, it might be a good segue into what Phil might be able to talk a little bit more about, but we're continuing to monitor, well, Phil mostly, I'll be honest, monitor federal funding opportunities and keeping an eye out on things that we think might be unique to Montgomery County and engaging potential partners on those federal funding opportunities. So as Ben mentioned, there are several that we have supported already that were not necessarily initiated by us, but we supported, and we're continuing to make sure that we're bringing awareness to our partners on those opportunities so that we can leverage that and also work better on our partnerships. So I think I'll pass it along to Phil. That might be a good segue into some of the work that we're working on together. Thank you.
Ben, is it possible to bring up your slide deck again?
Sure.
Slide 5 and 6.
Happy to do that.
So just some footnotes to Ben's presentation, and Chairman Reamer and members, thank you very much for this opportunity. Could you get to, there we go. So as Ben mentioned, we were the only organization of our type to testify before the public hearing. Ben's testimony will be submitted formally by the deadline of early April. These are reforms to the policies that govern technology transfer from universities and other non-federal entities, like private sector companies, under the by DOLE Act. It's technically a public rulemaking, and it's underway. It's based upon NIST's proposals that came out of the Green Paper, designed to make it easier for the non-federal sector, the private sector, to work more closely with federally funded research and development. And so that's now on a path. It'll probably be several months before the comments are incorporated and a final rule is submitted. But as has been noted by Brian and Rich and Ben, anything that improves tech transfer nationally in terms of policy benefits us disproportionately. In a parallel track, there is a legislative package that was, I think, as Rich and Ben also mentioned, Brian mentioned, submitted to Congress in the last session. It's currently under review by the new administration, and this would affect the technology transfer from organizations such as NIH's intramural funding, NIST, and other GO-GOs, government-owned, government-operated research organizations. So that's on a separate path. I think there may be an opportunity to move that along. As Brian mentioned, there's interest now. There's going to be there's interest in the Senate to mark up the Endless Frontier bill. That might be a vehicle. That will be a very busy bill, so it may be a separate legislation that will emerge. And this is another opportunity for the county to step forward and establish its bona fides as a knowledge center for working with federal research institutions. Can we go to the next slide, please? Ben, can you do that? So just briefly about this, NSTEP is a program that NIST funded with TEDCO. It's currently limited to NIST scientists, but there's an opportunity to both deepen the program at NIST and perhaps expand it to other federal agencies. This would require special funding, of course. The LEAP program is the reverse, whereas the NSTEP program helps people departing federal agencies to start companies. The LEAP program brings young entrepreneurs and innovators to work with federal agencies. And Hans, I think Elliot Levine, who serves as an unofficial advisor to you, and I have worked together on this program. I just completed a study as part of a team with the National Academy of Public Administration on DOE's tech transfer. So this is one of the tools that they use to advance their entrepreneurial activity with their national labs.
Bill, thank you so much. Can you say again, the NSTEP program is funded by and for postdocs and departing NIST scientists?
Correct. To start companies. It's a $100,000 grant from NIST. This is funded by NIST to TEDCO, and that TEDCO runs the program.
I see. And tell me again what the program provides. Is it entrepreneurship support, essentially?
Basically seed funding for the scientist for a year, $100,000, and it also provides additional funding for entrepreneurial training with any variety of organizations, such as the I-Corps program, which is piloted by NSF. So that's helping people go out and start companies. The LEAP program helped bring scientists and entrepreneurs to work with federal research institutions, and in that case, it's typically through a CRADA. So there's a stipend, similar stipend to the young entrepreneur, and there's funding to the lab to support the CRADA activity. So this is a different kind of, it's the other way. So they're both working in the same kind of young entrepreneurial space.
And these are areas that we can expand on as well locally.
Yes, the LEAP program is very well established across several of the DOE national labs, and I think it's a really good, based upon my research, I think it's a really good model. Let me just say one final comment. Christy mentioned SBIR, so she's doing terrific analysis of. So as you know, the county has an SBIR program. TEDCO has an SBIR program that we're supporting in Montgomery County, focused on underserved communities. And Rich mentioned his SBIR program. He didn't quite get to describe, I don't think, the excellent workshop that he held last week. It was he and Judy did a fabulous job, very well organized. I was able to listen in, and the state has passed legislation, but not, I believe, funded it for it. So there are at least 4 programs that Montgomery County is participating in. So we're supporting those efforts, and I think it's obvious that some higher level of cooperation, coordination amongst those programs would probably be desirable and to the benefit of and that's something that Ben has thought about taking a lead on as well.
Terrific. Well, I would love to dive more into that. Talk about leveraging, federal impact. Like the SBIR program, it's the federal government providing the actual funding to the company. We have a matching program. However, to the extent that we can help entrepreneurs along that pathway, that's all value add. So if we can help a company, if we can help a scientist ultimately succeed in getting an SBIR, that's just a huge, huge impact.
And I would finally say in this area, we are unique. There are many states that have SBIR support programs, but we're the only county that has a formal funded program.
Right.
Which nodding, so I think I'm right. And
one of the things we want to do is figure out, how is our county support most effective? Like right now we have the model that we have, but I think it could be reconfigured a bit. Rich?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, just to pick up on Phil's compliment there. Thank you, Phil. The webinar last week was 17 through 19, 3 days. There were 163 registrants, and it was all virtual. And the program was to have the companies do one-on-one meetings with the program officers at the federal agencies or institutes to have one-on-one dialogue to learn about proposals, what they're looking for, how to submit a proposal. And the benefit we have when we can do this in person, we get all of these program managers in Montgomery County from NIH, and these people can meet with them on a personal basis. But there were 460 one-on-one meetings requested between entrepreneurs and program managers. And the other thing is, we had 47 from Montgomery County entrepreneurs. There were 119 from Maryland, but more importantly, we had 17 other states represented there and 3 other countries. So this is also a way to say Montgomery County has its act together. We're providing these resources to small businesses who want to apply and become more competitive with the federal agencies. Hey, why not come and relocate here if you're not here already? And we have other great programs that we can introduce you to. So I think it's a good program for retaining companies as well as attracting companies. And we really have the benefit and the luxury of having all of these program officers with NIH in our backyard and it's part of their mandate that they have to outreach to educate companies on how to be more competitive in applying for their funds and their grants. So I think this is something that we need to do more of to get greater exposure to our companies to be more competitive and get a bigger share of the pie within Montgomery County companies.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich.
I think I'm passing the baton to Brad.
Well, thanks, Phil. I appreciate it. I'll just make a couple of remarks and keep them short. In addition to everything that's been said collectively here, which we're all working on together, I think one of the biggest opportunities we're trying to take advantage of now is the opportunity to pull new companies, new jobs into Montgomery County. As you've seen over the last year, that's been very significant in the life science industry. And that gives us an opportunity to, again, leverage these federal assets. I mean, those are the people who are going to hire the postdocs who are here working already at NIH and give them jobs, give them the training, keep them here to be the next generation of companies which start up in Montgomery County and, again, hopefully add hundreds of more jobs. So for us, it's a collective approach. All of these things help to pull in new jobs, help to grow the economy. In addition to that, we see that the need for a workforce here that's trained also is very important. And so working collectively with all the educational institutions in the area, even including Montgomery County Public Schools, on how we fill that pipeline of talent and make sure that there are people who have the skill sets necessary to allow these companies to locate here, to grow here. And you have a really significant cross-section of different job types that are necessary here. So these are all important priorities that we sort of add to the mix to keep all these moving forward.
And to expand on that, not only that we can provide the talent that the companies need, but ultimately that wherever you live in the county, whoever, whatever your background, whatever your circumstances, you have you know how you might be able to get on that path yourself to become one of those employees that gets hired. There's a terrific, equity dimension to our workforce strategy. So these things all ultimately fit together.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Hans. I think you made an incredibly important point. And the Bio Boot Camp recently was I don't want to say an experiment, but it really was to try and understand how the universities of Shady Grove and UMBC and Montgomery College could help essentially retrain workers who were displaced during the pandemic to open up new opportunities for them that might not otherwise have existed. Another effort we've been working on for the last year is to help people understand that life sciences jobs, which happens to be what we're talking about right now, aren't all the same. There's a tremendous diversity of types of jobs that are employed in this industry, whether they're accounting, finance, manufacturing, marketing, sales, clinical research associates, lab and bench scientists. So there's such a diverse cross-section of types of skill sets and educational requirements, from certifications to degrees to advanced degrees, that we really want to work to continue to get that word out that it's not just an opportunity, it's a multitude of opportunities for diverse people and diverse skill sets.
Thank you. Well, that's terrific. Excellent presentations. I really appreciate this. I think we have come a long way in the past 2 years. Again, this was identified as an important programmatic area for the county to have a big agenda in years ago, but I think not enough was happening. And in a very short amount of time, we've assembled a phenomenal team, and we have a lot of programs that are either there to build on or we're have new ideas that we can expand. So I'm really happy to see all this, and I think now we've just got the final hard job at the council side over the next month or two to figure out what additional steps do we want to take through the county budget and build on these programs. So that's something we would like to ask you to follow up on with us, and just let us know what you think would be the best opportunities. We don't know how the funding will all play out this year, but I think it would be very helpful to hear from you what you think are the most impact, how we can have the most impact for any additional investments. I was glad to see the executive, wanted to put some funding into this topic area. That's great. and we can certainly build on that as well. So lots happening here. I'll see if my colleagues have any questions.
Yeah, I'd like to just add, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman, before we turn it over to your colleagues, there may be initiatives that will work with you and your committee towards. One uncertain area are the federal grant opportunities, the applications. We need to commit beforehand, but not necessarily won't have to match the funds until we receive or once we're awarded an application award. So some of that is uncertain, but if there's a need, I think our intention is to go apply it to as many programs that are possible, and then sort of work out the funding issues later on. For example, for MCDC, we haven't necessarily forward funded in advance any of the applications that we'll have, but I can foresee that we could partner with BHI, with AURP, with the Tech Council, with TEDCO, a number of other similarly like-minded organizations towards some of this federal CARES funding or American Rescue Plan funding. So that is one of the uncertainties as we move forward, as we try to leverage the federal resources and the funding opportunities.
Okay, duly noted. Great. Well.
Oh, I was going to mention also earmarks are back. It seems like even the Republicans have embraced that. I don't know if there's a specific strategy, but you ought to keep that in mind as some kind of initiative that would make sense from a community development standpoint, because certainly many of my members are looking at that as well. So,
and I have talked about this myself with both Senator Van Hollen and Congressman Trone, Congressman Raskin, and we know Senator Cardin has a long history in these areas as well. So we have the federal delegation to really move quickly and deliver some significant investments, I think, if we can just tee it up properly. So I look forward to working with you on that, with all of you on that in the coming weeks and months to strike while the iron is hot here. And certainly that's what the Pandemic Center is about, but there are complementary initiatives as well. Super. All right. Well, thank you. I'm not seeing any necessarily additional questions or comments from colleagues. So that is a terrific presentation. Lots to work with here. Thank you for your work. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on to our next item. Okay. So our next item is taking up an appropriation recommended by or proposed by Councilmember Giwando. So certainly invite him to make some comments about it, and then we will go into the staff packet. I'm sure we have a number of executive and outside partners here. See Jerome Fletcher, Javier Rivas, and so we will engage in some dialogue there as well. So let me just start by turning to Councilmember Giwando.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good morning to everybody. Good to see you. This is a very important appropriation, I think, and along with many, many other forms of support that we've given for our businesses that have been hit really hard during the last year. Obviously, we often talk about the health pandemic and the loss of life, but certainly the economic fallout is a pandemic in and of itself, and also very inequitable in how it's impacting certain communities. And so this appropriation, which was introduced about 6 weeks ago, a little more now, on February 9th, is a effort to target and consistent with our previous support, over $80 million actually either passed through or initiated by us support to businesses in the county, to a segment that has been underrepresented in that pie. This would be $1.5 million for rental assistance, and also a function that we've done a lot of rental assistance for people staying in their homes, which is important. But this specifically, if you're a small business, and this is targeted at businesses that have a gross earnings of $500,000, $500,000 or less. And so these are your small businesses, usually 5 or less employees, and that have retail space. So your small retail spaces, nail salon, esthetician, clothing store, go down the list. So many you could talk about. That this would help them with either 3 months of their back rent, many of whom are behind, and our development community has worked with a lot of our small retailers, hasn't been able to keep all of them open. I've certainly witnessed some that have closed in the county, but that's an area of struggle. $10,000 or 3 months of rent, whichever is less. And this would be targeted to also consistent with our equity approach and targeted at the zip codes that have been hit hardest by the pandemic, where you're going to have a disproportionate amount of women-owned and businesses owned by people of color. And so this is something I just wanted to give a couple of stats to kind of frame this, because I think it's one of the reasons why this is needed. There was a recent public-private strategy survey done in December of 2020 that showed that nationally 73% of Black-owned businesses surveyed in this national poll will run out of money in less than 3 months, in 3 months or less. 73% of Black-owned businesses. There's an additional number you could talk about our Latino-owned and other women-owned businesses that are struggling. Just to give you another example, by mid-April in the pandemic, so going back to the pandemic, there have been 440,000 Black business owners who had shuttered their companies for good. And that was a 40% plunge. 40% of Black businesses nationally had closed. By comparison, about 17% of white businesses had closed during that same period. And this is a UC Santa Cruz research poll. And so you see, even though it's hitting everybody hard, there's disproportionality, and you have a higher percentage of these smaller businesses in that group. And so I think, and then within that, in your retail, rent is the highest cost. So you see that, and then the last thing I'll just share here, if I could, Mr. Chairman, is this chart. So this is a chart that shows within our various communities, Asian, Black, Hispanic, Native American, white. The dark red is how many businesses have closed completely. So you see in the Black community, it's 13%.
Is this local data or is this national data?
This is based on, I can give you the source at the bottom here. This is based on national data from the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Unfortunately, we don't have this data locally, which is something I was going to get to. It's a problem, and it's going to inhibit us having a good recovery, I think, if we don't get the data. But because of our size and diversity, we tend to track, similar when I requested our Department of Health and Human Services to gather death data by race and ethnicity and age. We track similarly to the national, and I would suspect it would be the same here. But you have 13% of Black businesses have closed completely. The only one higher is Native American businesses, which is a much smaller sample size, of course, unfortunately. And then you have 8% of Hispanic and 6% of white. The lighter red is that they are partially open. And so you see there's also the largest percentage of partially open and struggling is what that would mean. 37% for Black, 28% for Hispanic, 22% for white. And then the blues are either operating at a modification, mostly open, but modifications, and the dark blue is fully open. So you see that there's also a lot of people that haven't necessarily closed yet, but that are hanging on by a thread. And I think so that's why this is important to do, and it's timely. And I think we need to get it to folks as soon as possible. It won't be the last thing we need to do, but I think it's an important thing. And the last thing I'll say, thankfully, I'm glad we have the executive branch here. We've been able to work with them over the last couple of months when we move this forward, to reallocate $900,000 in unused CRF funds from the reopening grants that could be utilized for this purpose and would not require a separate appropriation. And then we're happy to partner with the LEDC, who is here, and we'll talk about their role. but they're ready to hit the ground running and have agreed to administer this in our communities. So we're really thankful for their partnership. So that's the summary there, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thanks. Why don't we go into the packet?
Sounds good, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Juando shared, the Small Business Rental Assistance Program was introduced in early February. Most of the criteria for the program are listed in the appropriation resolution, similar to other pandemic-related business assistance programs. I'll quickly go through that at base information, and then as noted in the staff report, executive staff have commented on some areas where they believe things could change a little bit or might be advantageous to running the program. We'll go through each of those as the committee wants to discuss them. And so in general, the program is a $1.5 million appropriation using the general fund reserves, although Mr. Juano just noted there may be other sources of funding if the committee wants to recommend those changes. It'll offer up to $10,000 or 3 months rent, whichever is less, to eligible businesses. Businesses that are eligible will be those that are physically located in the county or can prove that they have 50% of their revenue or employees in the county, very similar to other business assistance programs as we had during the pandemic. There's a criterion that requires the business to prove that it has 500,000 or less in total revenue pre-pandemic. The business needs to be a retail or service-related business, but not restaurant or food service, given the amount of aid the state has provided for those types of businesses in the state. There were 2 tranches that the state had provided, and so that was specifically excluded since those businesses had specific programs already. The business will need to verify that it has a commercial lease, since this will be a rent payment grant. And then currently the business needs to demonstrate a revenue loss due to the pandemic. There's also priority considerations, both if the business can verify that it's minority or women-owned, they'll receive priority consideration, and if the business can also verify that it's located in a zip code that has had impact greater from COVID-19, mostly due to number of cases, they will also receive priority consideration in this current appropriation. So, as I shared, the executive staff have noted that they've asked and spoken with LADC, or the Latino Economic Development Center, to help administer this program. We're joined by Mr. Rivas today, and unfortunately, the packet came out earlier last week when this was on, and we had not received news of Ms. Bilinick's departure from LADC, and so that's why we're joined by Javier, but I'm sure he'll be able to provide information that the committees need. And so I'll start there, and if LADC or Mr. Fletcher have anything they want to share related to the administration of this program, they can go there. But one comment from executive staff is that LADC has requested about 10% of the program's appropriation to help administer it. And so under the current appropriation, that means only about $1.35 million will be available to businesses unless the committee recommends a different appropriation to adjust for that overhead. So I'll pause there and give Mr. Fletcher and LADC a chance to comment on that particular item.
Welcome, Mr. Rivas, Mr. Fletcher. Okay, I wanted to ask a question here, just first on the businesses that are targeted, but certainly, welcome, Jerome, beginning with you, any general comments you wanted to make. But maybe I could just start off with a general question. So it's intended for retail or service businesses, but not restaurant or food service. Can you just talk a bit more about what that is intended to be? So it's first of all, if you're an accountant or is an accountant a retail business? I think not, right? But
well, no, it could be if you're tax preparation. If you have, if you go to the tax preparation, you see the big tax window sign and you have space, that would count. It's anyone who is not a restaurant that has retail space in the county that's under 500,000. Yeah. So that's a lot of businesses, by the way.
What defines retail space? Is that
you have a commercial lease? Okay,
but there must be another definition of retail, I would assume, or else it's any business that is not a food service. Because anybody with a lease, is that your intent? Is that it's anybody with a lease as long as you're not food service, or is it retail?
Yeah, there's not. I think you're thinking retail like strip mall. They would apply. They would certainly be eligible, like that, a front-facing business. But if you had an accountant, like I used to go to an accountant that rented space in the World Building, right? Okay, in Silver Spring, you wouldn't see it from the outside, but they're renting space and they're providing a service and they're a small business. They would still be eligible if that's what you're asking. It's not just a front-facing retail.
I'm trying to understand at least I want to understand what your vision is. I want to make sure if the link. So I would have thought retail was a more narrow category than that, just statistically or something like that. So it sounds like it's not, at least in your intent. But can I? Okay.
We could change the way we define it. I just think it depends on what the definition of retail is, I guess. I don't know if we define it in code anywhere. I don't think we do.
I don't know. I mean, I just think of retail as a place that sells products, I suppose. I don't know, but I don't know what it is. I mean, anyway, Jerome, can you talk to us a little bit, and maybe Mr. Rivas?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for having us here. So to go piggyback on your question and your concern, where it says, service related business, I think that's where it sort of expands from that typical retail that you're thinking about. Because when you do think of retail, the first thing you think of is, well, I'm going in to purchase something and getting it right back. But I think the service related area sort of expands that enough to where that we will have the impact that is desired by Council.
Because a lot of things are a service. It's almost as though if you're not a service, you're a retail. So in other words, is it your intent that it very broadly applies to businesses that have a lease that are not food service?
Yes, that is correct. That was the intent.
Absolutely correct.
Okay. Okay. That helps me understand a little better.
Mr. Chairman, while we're on this item, the executive staff did note a couple extra exclusions they wanted. It was later on in the report, but since we're on this item, I just wanted to raise that issue. The language that was provided to council staff was they thought that exclusions of medical practice, professional service businesses, which kind of, again, muddies the waters a little bit, difference between service-related and or professional service businesses, religious organizations, or daycare facilities, per executive staff's notes. Most of these businesses either have received grants through other special programs that the county has supported, and or they do not depend on foot traffic, like a retail or service-oriented business, and that was why they proffered that. I'll leave it there. If Mr. Fletcher has more to say, that's fine, but the committee would need to move and change the appropriation to meet that. If not, it would just still be the very broad understanding of retail and service-related businesses as the original drafted language.
And for Mr. Fletcher, I just say I'm okay with that. I think that's a good narrowing and targeting, but I want to hear from Mr. Fletcher, obviously.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Smith. The purpose of that information was just to make sure that we allow those who had not received support yet to be first in line, and not allowing those who have already received probably multiple areas of support from the county at this point, not to sort of just sort of blur that line of those who need the help the most. So this is really narrowing it down to the intent, I think, of what the council member was trying to accomplish, making sure that, the rental and the lease is examined, and these people who have received less help than restaurants and some other of our small business categories who have received help will not get in front of the line.
Okay. What do you know, what I recall from the presentations about the local, the PPE production fund, that a very high share, I think 70+% of the businesses that received grants were women and minority owned. What do we know about the PHED grant and other emergency grant programs as far as our ability to provide them, as far as the success of applicants who are women and minority owned in gaining access to those programs?
So the PHED program, we did not collect the data up front when we had them fill out applications and we actually processed them. That was one of the learning points that we took away from the PHED program. We are actually processing their that same information on the back end of that process. So we will have it, but I do not believe we captured all of it as of now. As we were making disbursements, we went back to them to ask for that information. We can provide that when we do have it.
Okay, sorry, say that again. You're basically seeking that after the fact, based more or less. You're trying.
Yes. One of the issues from the first program, the PHED program, which was the very first program, was that we did not solicit that information on the initial application. So we are getting it on the back side of the auditing process as we close out that program, which of course, you know, we've gotten all the money out the door, and now we have to reconcile with them based on how, you know, they're using the funds, et cetera, and we are going to collect that information.
Okay.
And one of the things on that, Mr. Chairman, is that it kind of ties into the another issue that, you know, this population, when I introduced this, I don't think we don't have enough information about this population in general. We haven't done a disparity study in several years since I've been on the council. It's something that I think we should do and should be a priority for this budget, particularly coming out of COVID. But I think getting the PHED numbers, targeting this money, I think it'll help us understand what's happening in a better way.
Right, and a disparity study applies to the businesses in the procurement world. My understanding is.
Yes, primarily. But I would like to see that.
You're talking about something a little different here, which is essentially I mean, you could call it a disparity study, but it's sort of an economic
health. It's
a study of the local business economy, and you know, with a focus on ownership and what the trends are there.
And council members, we are aware that we need to do a disparity study. I think our legal team has said to us for, you know, the 2 years that I've been here, that it's time for us to do a new one. So this could sort of push that to be done. Although in the budget submittal that we just provided to council a week or so ago, it is not listed in that particular budget proposal. It was one of the budget cuts that didn't make it, but we are aware that one needs to be done.
Yeah, and it factors into the thing later which I'm okay with because we don't have the new study, but that we not targeting it to women and minority owned businesses because we don't have the local data, even though I shared you the national data, which I know because I've talked to dozens of businesses that many are in that same boat, but I think it's another reason we need to do it so that we can use it to target our programs as we try to recover.
Could I ask about the disparity study? Because I know the GEO committee extended the deadline, which legally requires the executive to provide a disparity study, which is the legal justification that the county is able to have a minority business, women-owned business, and disability-owned business enterprise. If it's not funded in this budget, can we get information on? I know it's a government operations fiscal policy question, but it's directly related to this. Of what the deadline was that it was extended to already, and whether or not the current budget submission will allow us to achieve the already extended deadline that was provided. And if Mr. Fletcher, if you don't have that now, that's fine, but maybe Mr. Smith and you could provide that back to this, I guess, both my committees, since it's really a GEO committee issue, but I do think it's relevant to what we're talking about here. So I think it probably, I don't want to speak for colleagues, but I imagine they'd be interested in the information as well.
Okay, I can definitely tell you that it was not included in the budget submittal, but I will have to get the extension date for sure. I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I just think it's relevant as we take up the budget. We've
Absolutely.
already extended that, and for it not to be funded after we already provided an extension based on fiscal constraints is a challenge.
Okay. Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, so all right, so continue with the background here. We're into the data question. So in the data segment here, you've listed some of the zip codes. These are the top 10 zip codes as envisioned in the appropriation.
Well, this was just data. Sorry, Mr. Freeman. This was just data that was available from the county's dashboard. Certainly, if there are more than I mean, all the zip codes are listed there that are in the county. This was just giving a sense that based on the current appropriation language, that if these zip codes apply, they would certainly be in the top 10.
Yeah.
I don't imagine a lot will change. I mean, some of the numbers will change, and if there's a cutoff date, since the data is not updated daily for the dashboard, we can certainly consider that. But again, given the volume of cumulative cases, like I would imagine that LEDC and the executive staff would use that dashboard as considering priority consideration based on zip code.
Yeah, and then just so we're clear, the idea anyone that fits the broad criteria can apply. It's just, I expect that if it's, we do the job I think we can do and the needs there would be a large number, you could prioritize by using the zip codes. If for the first 150 businesses, for example, that applied. So.
Right. So again, I'm sorry, I missed what you just said there, Councilmember Joando.
So I was saying that these zip codes are intended to, again, as a measure to target within, but everyone can apply. If you have a business that's a retail or service related, 500,000 or less, anyone can apply from anywhere in the county. It's just if we get, 1,000 applicants and we've got 150 that we can give out, they would use the priority list to work through and make sure that you're targeting some of the hardest hit areas.
That's how you're recommending it be constructed now?
Yeah. Well, I think that's how they would consider. You talk to Ms. Fletcher, but I think that's what I think of as a priority. It's not everyone's eligible to apply, but you would use it in prioritization. But if there were only 100 that applied, everyone gets it, for example.
That is correct.
Okay. All right.
I think Andrew has a question. I see you on your screen.
Yeah, well, it's more of a comment. So just for everybody's, for discussion here, this same approach was taken in a 3R program originally, and it caused a lot of challenges and a lot of problems and a lot of pushback. One of the biggest challenges is where your business is located. It does not necessarily relate to who owns the business and where the workers work, and so it's not necessarily always the best approach. That targeted approach, we basically funded our way out of that problem. We ended up ultimately with the CARES Act funding appropriating enough money from the state, that $8.2 million that came from the state for restaurant and food-based businesses. We supplemented $400,000 to fund everybody who had applied in order to avoid the issues that had been created where you had all of these folks who had applied and then found out they weren't eligible. You had a lot of folks who had heard that there was a priority and didn't apply because they didn't think that they would be eligible, and then felt like it was unfair once other folks ended up being funded. So I just want to point out we do have a little bit of experience with a similar approach, and it came with some significant challenge. I totally appreciate what the intention is here. I'm not questioning that at all. I think that the data that you showed is staggering. I don't think it's surprising, unfortunately, to any of us, but it's a huge challenge, and I think we're all committed to an equitable recovery. I think the challenge is operationally, how do you make that work? And I just wanted to note that as part of the conversation.
No, I appreciate that. And, one of the things I was in thinking about this, I agree with you. I think in lieu of doing the best thing in my mind is to have the data or be able to rely on national data, by the way. I think, I think legally that would be sound, but our lawyers didn't think so, to focus it specifically on women and minority owned and disabled businesses. But in lieu of that, I do think in this context where retail space being the driver, we all know, because of trends and the way the market works, real estate market works, it is going to cost more in some places to have retail space than it costs in others. And there is some correlation, not exclusively, I admit it, but there is some correlation, I think, to the likelihood of these businesses being in communities that are listed in these zip codes, a disproportionate amount. So I think it might be a little different in that in that regard. But yeah, I agree with you, and it's not perfect, and it has considerations. But that was just the thinking, you know. Marketing is going to be important here, and we've talked about that. I think that's the big part of it. And maybe could we have Mr. Rivas maybe say something about?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been waiting for the right moment to invite him to the conversation. I reached out to LEDC last week to find out, just to ask a few questions, and they had as many questions for me as I had for them. So I didn't want to put him on the spot, but welcome your comments here, Mr. Rivas.
Yeah, thank you, council members. I do have big shoes to fill since Ms. Balanek has departed. I am not stepping into the role of executive director. I'm just the program manager for the Resilient Business Corridors program, which covers Montgomery County and Prince George's County.
Which program again? Sorry.
It's called the Resilient Business Corridors program.
Okay.
So my program is directly involved in direct services. Technical assistance to small businesses in Montgomery County and Prince George's County. I do have a prepared statement, so if I could read that, and then you can have any follow-up questions for me and about the administration of these funds. LEDC is a 30-year-old organization with its mission to drive the economic and social advancement of low and moderate income Latinos and other underserved communities. Maryland, Virginia, and Puerto Rico. LEDC offers entrepreneurship, small business development, financing, affordable housing preservation, and housing counseling services. LEDC is a U.S. Treasury certified community development financial institution, or CDFI, a U.S. SBA microlender, community advantage lender, and paycheck protection program PPP lender. And a U.S. USDA rural lending intermediary. Our Montgomery County office is in Wheaton, and we serve the entire county. LEDC also has 2 corridor-specific projects in the county, which involve assisting small businesses impacted by the county's construction project in the Wheaton Triangle, and the state's Purple Line light rail project. COVID has presented a number of challenges for LEDC and its clients. However, LEDC has moved quickly to address them by upgrading all of its technology systems to be able to operate and deliver its services remotely. We also adapted our programming and services, fundraised to provide financial assistance to its clients, and actually stood up a new department to meet new demands and opportunities. As a result, LEDC small business team met a 286% increase in demand for its services in FY 2020 due to COVID. So this is from 914 clients served to 3,530. This is not including women-focused programming.
By county, or that's Montgomery County?
That's Montgomery County. Yeah.
Say that again. Then you have.
That's actually, well, this is a small business team. I think that encompasses DC as well. So that's not just Montgomery County. Okay,
but you're serving. Say it again. You're serving how many clients?
So from 914 clients to 3,530 for FY 2020. So this new department, the LEDC's new Direct Community Investments Department, focused on collaborating with local governments and private donors to deploy emergency cash assistance grants, and to date has deployed over $37.2 million and is poised to deploy another $10 million in the next month. So COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted minority communities in the DMV area, and is particularly disruptive in Montgomery County. Latinos and Black African Americans have been the hardest hit, having contracted the virus at higher rates. Given longstanding disenfranchisement and lack of long-term financial security, many have lost jobs and or have to risk theirs and their families' lives just to put food on the table and remain housed. Furthermore, those who ventured into entrepreneurship now face the risk of losing everything they've spent their lives saving and letting go of their employees who depend on their income. We are excited at the prospect of the proposed commercial rental assistance grant program to support with rental costs. This is particularly beneficial as we find that the vast majority of our clients don't own their space. Our clients in the county specifically all have revenue of under $1 million. Recently, we have found that 85% of our clients reaching out for technical assistance are asking for help in renegotiating their leases. Many have switched to month or are currently in deferment. Some have let their leases expire and have verbal agreements to stay in their units until the landlord decides otherwise.
Can I just pause you on that question?
Sure.
Thank you for making that point. And I unfortunately just haven't been able to get there yet. But one of the initiatives I would really like the committee to work on this spring is a lease consultation program for small businesses. Because as you said, a lot of these businesses have lease issues. And, you know, those lease issues are going to hang over them for years. And some of the businesses are going to find that the debt that they've incurred, ultimately they sink beneath the weight. Some will be able to renegotiate and get onto a path that, you know, they can survive. But in either case, they're going to need these businesses need a lot of help in that conversation, and they're not necessarily, I mean, some may be sophisticated, you know, real estate, you know, they may have sophisticated views on real estate and leases, you know, but some may just be a mom and pop business that signed a lease. So New York has a really interesting program, and they have built kind of like a center of excellence or a center of support for small businesses to get advice. It's not really the same as getting legal advice. It's a little bit different than that. You know, there's not a representation involved, but it's very clearly like navigation support, you know, resources, experts to consult, and generally just a host of available resources for businesses to be more successful in their conversation with their with the property owner, with their landlord. And, you know, certainly one of my questions all along about our business grants has been, is this going to the business or is this going to the property owner? You know, and of course, in some sense, it's hard to detangle that, right? Ultimately, it probably doesn't matter in a certain sense. But in another sense, it does matter because maybe the property owner is able to absorb that. And, you know, the money that we're providing is not going to have the impact that we want it to have because the property owner would have been able to absorb that anyway. You know, these things are probably to some extent imponderable, but it's why I think generally we ought to be looking at how to empower business owners, you know, to make their own case as much as we possibly can, while providing support that they need, you know, to kind of make it through. So in any event, this is a different approach. I know the appropriation is a financial support for a business. And I think we ought to be additionally looking at technical support, which is what you're describing as part of your program. You know, technical support so that for the same investment of dollars, we might be able to help fundamentally more businesses over a longer period of time. You know, it might be something that could play out for years to their advantage, you know, as opposed to that got me through 2 months, but I'm still kind of underwater. So it's not a zero, you know, this is not an alternative. I'm just saying, I think this is an initiative that we need to have.
Yeah, and we are currently waiting for final approval for a legal clinic and webinar series through the county. I think Judith Stevenson, the small business navigator for the county, set forth a proposal for an administration of this program, and LEDC. We're waiting for it, but it will include a series of webinars for the coming year and 2 legal clinics where small business owners will be able to come and consult with a lawyer. I mean, and already though through our program, we have a small budget for specialized consultation, and some of that is legal. And like I said, the majority of or 85% at least of the clients that are coming to LEDC or existing clients or new clients are reaching out for that specific topic. Unfortunately, it's coming at a time where, ideally, right, they should have come to us before signing the lease and not at the point where they need to understand the terms of their lease or figure out what they signed, in these leases, which is what we end up having to summarize for them. And some of that is troubling, the personal guarantees being one of them, I think is specifically troubling.
Very troubling. I wish that I think the state legislature, if they have the power, I don't think we do.
I think there is a bill introduced by David Moon currently.
Yeah, that's unconscionable.
Yeah. No, and I think it's a terrible practice. And again, people don't necessarily, they don't necessarily know what they're signing, unfortunately, and so we tend to.
Well, they don't have a choice either, right? I mean,
right. I don't think there's a choice. Right.
If the property owner says you're gonna have to do a personal guarantee, and that if they all say that, then you got to do a personal guarantee.
Yeah. So I think hopefully legislation, can be done at the state level. Something will be done. I know David Moon's, I think it's House Bill 7.
I reached out to him about that because of a friend of mine, David Fogel, Bump and Grind.
Bump and Grind, yeah.
Shared with me the fact that he's got a personal guarantee. I couldn't believe it. It was
and again, it's very common, and it's like a lot of those folks, affected are people that have worked, very hard most of their lives to get a foothold and gain some assets. And our goal as an organization is to help them secure those assets. But I mean, if it's something that's, sign away during a lease, and again, they don't really have a choice. And ultimately, like the only recourse they have too is the courts. And again, they're not going to, they don't feel empowered enough, or they don't have resources enough to secure representation in court and fight, some of this.
One of the things I wanted to mention, I think this hopefully goes without saying, but I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely about that counseling and technical assistance. I would hope, and Mr. Rivas, maybe you can answer this directly, that as a part of the 10% in the administration, anyone who applies and processes and that you deal with, that would be part of the interaction with them, right? And if they're getting a $10,000 grant, great, because they need it, but also they would have access to your services for like, hey, what do I do when my lease comes up? Or, that kind of, that would be a part of what you provide. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, it doesn't just stop at the administration of the grant, So we do work in partnership. It's a different department, it's the direct community investment, but we work in partnership with them through technical assistance. So yeah, those clients are not just.
They're not just pass through money. You're not just signing the check. Yeah.
Right. It's not just one and done. Yeah.
Right. Awesome.
Okay. All right, let's keep going through the packet then. That was good background. Or Mr. Rivers,
I did have some, I did have a few other things to
okay, please go ahead.
So we, let's see. Yeah, we talked about the folks that are now month to month and or currently in deferment. So also we have found that restaurants that were able to stay open during the pandemic are now starting to make a comeback. And I think this is thanks to all the assistance that has been provided through restaurant food and food service specific grants through the county and the state. So this is also the case for many of our retail clients, so including hair salons, beauty salons, discount marts, gift shops, and other small scale service industries. But at this point, many clients feel that they have no other, and I already mentioned this, that they have no other resource to negotiate their commercial leases but the courts. And this alone poses additional financial costs that they are not able to cover. And providing them with direct financial assistance to allow them to keep their current locations is crucial for the viability of these businesses. So our role within the program will be to help the county draft the application, creating a custom application portal where applicants can communicate directly with our staff through live chat for support in filling out the application. So we will then review applications to ensure that they meet the minimum eligibility criteria. So to accomplish this, we will review 2019 and 2020 financials to determine revenue loss, review leases or rental agreements, and we will also ensure to prioritize businesses and zip codes that have experienced the greatest impact from COVID-19. And then after applications have all been reviewed, we will submit a recommendation list for the county to provide us with final approval of the applicants.
So share again the technical assistance component. I like the possibility that this is more than just what the PHED grant was, which was show us your losses, here's your grant. I like the possibility that this is also comes with assistance in the lease conversation. How, you've alluded to that, but how much of it do you think you can really provide?
I don't know if I'm prepared to talk about the budget that we have for our specialized consultants for our programs, but it is limited, and I don't think we can reach every request that we can get. I mean, if we do get this approval through the county for this legal assistance program, let's say, we'll be conducting 2 webinars that will probably serve, on average, we can serve from, 50 to 200, attendees during these webinars. And then the clinics themselves will be pretty limited. As of right now, with the budget that was set forth by the county, I think we can do 2 legal clinics per year, and serving about 20 businesses per clinic.
Would there be a requirement that a business would need to come through the clinic in order to be eligible, or would you tie these things, or are they completely on parallel?
No, we would just market it and advertise, and then just our coaches would provide that intermediary between the business and the lawyer to prepare to make sure that those limited hours that they have available to consult with the lawyer will be well used and efficient. So if it means collecting documentation, which is what we end up doing a lot these days, is just making sure that folks have all their documents ready for any sort of grant application or renegotiation. So we end up having to do a lot of that, and which is a challenge, because a lot of the clients that we serve aren't necessarily, there's some limited, technical experience or accessibility, especially like scanning documents or even having access to email and other resources. So yeah.
I'd love to partner on something like this going forward, Hans. I think, this is the idea. This is this emergency assistance, and they will have access to the LEDC network. And certainly you'll advertise, I'm hearing, Mr. Rivas, to people who apply for this about these webinars and stuff. And I'm glad that you've applied to the grant that I guess Judy Stevenson's office has put forward. But we should work on something more. I think in addition, but just wanted to offer that.
I think the need is there. And again, it's unfortunate that clients come to us when it's, I wouldn't say too late, but we are at least helping them, summarize their leases, or, understanding their liabilities and understanding where, there might be some concessions, especially because of the, real estate market, commercial real estate market as it is,
So, right. To the point, I would welcome additional, I would welcome knowing what you could do to provide technical assistance on a bigger scale if you think that there's ability to scale that up.
Yeah, so, I think if we could increase our capacity, for sure. As you might imagine, like I said, the need has increased greatly from, the previous years and now due to COVID. So if we could increase our capacity in terms of, staffing, and then we could, and surely more, consultant budget specifically for legal, legal assistance, or like some partnerships with like local, legal organizations or pro bono or the Montgomery Bar Association or something like that, that they could provide some of those services in partnership. And again, we could, I think the original proposal from Judith was that it would be more of an administration and more partnerships between, LADC and these other organizations. But unfortunately, I think the budget was, not very limited. So if that was something that could be taken into consideration, I think that would be, help reach more people, obviously, and provide more of an impact.
Jerome?
Yes, thank you. Javier, you're far too kind. He really wanted to say that we scaled it down due to the budget. It was going to be a larger program, and we had to bring it back a little bit. And I love the way he said it, or didn't say it.
Do I understand then, Mr. Fletcher? So Judith Stevenson's program was going to partly or completely bring LADC in to implement it? Is that what I'm hearing?
No. So they're the partner who will actually be providing and linking up with those who will be giving out the legal services to the business owners and those in need. We wanted it to be a much longer program as opposed to, I think it's like a short series that's going to start in mid-April. And had we had more resources, then we could have provided more resources and it would have been extended. So the structure of the program still remains intact. It's just the longevity of it.
Okay, that makes sure I understand this. So you're saying that you have a program that is presently, launching, that's going to provide some of these services in April of the current year.
Correct.
And that is funded through what source?
I believe we funded it through our budget that Judy had available, if I'm not mistaken.
Business Solutions Group or something like that.
Right. We were trying to fund it through CRF funds, but we were told that it did not apply.
Okay, interesting. And so because of the limited funding available, it was you've got sort of a short-term implementation.
Correct.
But you don't yet have there wasn't enough money for a longer-term implementation. Is that, and maybe it could be scaled up. That's interesting. And then why wouldn't CRF apply? I don't know. Okay, so, and then is this program in your FY22 recommended budget?
No, sir. It is only a short-term project program for fiscal year 21 based on the funding that we have now in order to get it done. Our hope was that sort of to this conversation we're having today, once people saw the value of it and we were able to bring back some good news to county leadership, then we would garner more support that may allow it to continue. But right now we just had to start with what we had.
And is there continuity here, Javier, with like you were going to implement that seminar and it's very related to what this program, what you would be hired to do? Essentially, it's expanding that work. Am I understanding that correctly?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I guess I'm trying to understand. So if I understand what you are going to be providing these seminars in April with funding that the county is providing now, and this program would enable you to expand on that essentially. It's the same kind of pathway.
When you talk about this program, are we talking about the small business?
We're talking about the new appropriation that we're all here today to discuss.
Okay. I mean, it is in conjunction, and the thing is, we're not just like one and done with our clients. Obviously they have access to like all other resources, like other webinars and, like financial, capability, loans, small business loans. So it's not, it's not a one and done kind of thing, so we do refer within the organization, if people are looking for, first time home buyer programs or again, like just startup loans or capital.
Okay. I had a related question. Maybe this is more to Gene, but the new federal funding, is that available in FY21?
As we understand it, the county will receive 2 tranches of the $203.7 million. Half will be given sometime in fiscal 21, and half will be given the same time next year in fiscal 22.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
And Mr. Elrich's recommended budget has program some of the money both in fiscal 21 and 22, but not all of it.
It's not all programmed for 21.
Not all programmed, correct. But
So,
and the council staff's overview coming out in a couple of weeks for the recommended operating budget will detail where the funding has been allocated, at least in Mr. Elrich's budget, but as the council has appropriation authority, we'll be considering that.
so if we want to move forward here, it's not, but we wanted to use federal funding, we would not have to wait until, July and August for that program to be in effect. Because fortunately, some, almost like the introductory chapter has already been written. The LADC is doing some work in this area, and we can fund something that kind of builds on that and will be implemented relatively soon. If I'm hearing, this is how I'm piecing it together. Tell me if you think I'm wrong or if I'm not thinking about this.
Just to clarify, is this something the technical assistance for
Yeah, the technical assistance, for the small business community. That's kind of what I'm hearing. I don't know.
So, I mean, yeah, the technical assistance is already occurring. And like I said, we do have a budget within our program. So specifically, supporting the businesses along the Purple Line and in Wheaton, and actually like Montgomery County Countywide Services, we do have budgets for those specialized consultations. It's advice, it's not representation, and that's already happening. It's through those programs, it tends to, those consultations tend to vary from document review, which might take 2 hours, to something more actual negotiations, which might be up to like 15, 20 hours of legal assistance. So, so we do have like that capability already. We don't have a lot of, lawyers on our consultant roster, but so they are in high demand. So again, we are doing it now to a certain extent, and this would kind of supplement that. Again, our budget is not, we aren't able to serve everyone, but we have some experience making providing that service already as part of our broader technical assistance services.
So if I can, Mr. Rimmer, just in terms of process and kind of connection with what we've been talking about, the Chief Administrative Officer recently sent over a Section G amendment for 2 items. One of this was the Latino Economic Development Center's amendment, which was going to add $10,000 to the existing contract for this purpose, using existing appropriation already in the county executive's budget. But as always, the fiscal 22 recommended operating budget continues, as far as I can tell, until I'm told otherwise by OMB, still has the base budget for the Latino Economic Development Center and the Incubators program that was serving the Wheaton Technical Assistance Program. Clearly that building is completed and there will still be technical assistance, but certainly during the Fed committee's review of the operating budget, et cetera, this could also be part of that conversation, also in conjunction, obviously, with the federal funding, although I have not received any understanding of how the council is going to prioritize the American Rescue Plan funding yet. I believe that's going to be coming out soon.
Yes. So very generally, I would certainly recommend that this program be forwarded to the council with a note that, we will soon be figuring out how we're going to allocate FY21 rescue funding, American Rescue Plan funding, and it would be appropriate for this to be funded as part of that. But the good news is that that's FY21, presumably or potentially. So it's not like that's this will come around next year kind of situation.
Yeah. Well, I just want to be clear, I don't know what you're suggesting. I'm not sure if I'm hearing you right, but there's FY20 money that of 900,000, so we should get that out the door at a minimum today, in my view. If we could certainly add more money, I think there's going to be a robust response, and if we want to add more, as we have with other programs, and use the American Rescue Plan money in 21, I will be the first in line for that. But so I don't know what I just want to be clear about that.
FY20, I think that's FY21 is the current year. That's 20.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. I'm sorry. Yeah. FY21 money. Yeah.
Well, I'm not clear on whether that FY21 money is really there or not. That's an open question to me. the way I understand it is the county has overspent the CRF funding pretty significantly. And so while there is some in an account, it will be claimed 10 times over by different programs. Gene, what's the fiscal situation with that funding?
Sure. The council just received an update on the CRF funding yesterday during the council session. There is some unencumbered and unspent funding from certain appropriations, but as OMB and the executive side has represented, all of that money could be allocated easily to other needs under CRF, such as pay differential, et cetera. So, but nonetheless, as noted in the council staff report, there's and in fact, the chart yesterday showed that there's still $1 million unused and unencumbered funds from the Reopen program. And so that's the only business assistance program that remains in the CRF that has unused funds, which is why that one's noted. There are other ones, but council staff didn't believe those other ones would be as synonymous or as analogous to this program.
Yeah, Mr. Fletcher, could you comment on because we've worked with you on this, could you just comment on the position of how you would use that funding for this program, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So according to Chief Administrative Officer Rich Madaleno, the $900,000 will be available for this fund. It was unused from the Reopen program. And while you said that the CRF was overspent, it was more overcommitted. And so there was the flexibility once these funds became available from that business program for this to go back into another business assistance program. And that's why they were trying to link the dollars together. But the $900,000 is available if council so decides to use it for this purpose.
But how much is the county over now on the pay differential?
Well, as you heard yesterday, I mean, this like really convolutes it, and this is where I have some concerns and think that, you know, we ought to wait and decide how to allocate the Relief Plan Act money comprehensively, you know, and decide how much of that 82 million that is not encumbered is spent. But based on what we heard yesterday, pay differential, we have to find out how much FEMA is going to reimburse. I mean, this has been the ongoing issue. The challenge is it's not that FEMA, you know, originally the assumption was FEMA would reimburse everything at 75%. Now the reality is FEMA is going to reimburse some of the differential pay at 100%. But how much of that we still don't know. It's still unclear. And so there are, you know, pretty significant lingering questions of whether or not there are available funds. So, you know, on the one hand, this is a distinction without a difference. This money is being spent out of reserves because either the differential pay that FEMA doesn't reimburse would be spent out of reserves, you know, that could impact the 9.6% that is assumed in this budget, or this would. And, you know, either way, it you know, all the money is coming from essentially the same place. We can say that we're allocating it from one pot or another, but ultimately, you know, these commitments have been made. You know, it's already been spent. It's not like we're discussing the priorities. Now, what we do with the $82 million and how and whether the county council decides to allocate the $121 million in ARPA funds that the county executive is using to balance the budget, which we still have to appropriate. I mean, ultimately, it's our decision. He's recommended how he would do it, and we have to review it, and we'll be taking that up. But there are a lot of open questions here between the ARPA funding, the CRF NDA, and, you know, where and how that money comes in.
Yeah, if I could just chime in, I think I understand my colleagues' frustration, which I share, of making how we've gone through the process with pay differential, and we certainly need to, as a team, figure out how we're going to allocate the new monies from President Biden and the rescue plan, and we're happy about that. You know, this $1.5 million for a set of small businesses that desperately need help, we need to get this out of the door. I introduced this on February 9th, well before our new regime was in on special appropriations and how we were going to move forward. We had various scheduling conflicts, I understand. But, you know, I've personally talked to at least 15 businesses that are in this like 3-month running out of cash that are in this category. And I think for it to get caught up, this small amount of money relatively, that can have a big impact on businesses, to get caught up in this larger issue, which I am not dismissing, but we appropriated the money for the reopening grants. That has been appropriated. That action has been taken. It has not all been spent. At a minimum, we should be able to move forward with that. I think we should do the whole thing, because we're going to have the money and I think saying that $1.5 million going to help 150 or more small businesses that are struggling, about to run out of cash, I think is not a hard decision. So I understand the concern about the larger picture, but I would hope that we would not allow this to get bogged down in that.
Well, the hard decision was the pay differential.
Right. This has nothing to do with that.
Well, unfortunately, it may.
1.5 million. It doesn't have anything to do with it.
Could I make, so I have concerns here. I will say, I mean, as you know, I think we all agree on what the goal and the interest is here. I do have concerns on the fiscal aspect of it. And I do think that, one of the things that we failed to do originally, and we have a second chance to do with the second round of significant federal funding, is be much more thoughtful, much more comprehensive, much more strategic, much more collaborative, executive and council in figuring out how to deploy the funds. I don't think we did a very good job of that. I think it was an emergency. We were in a crisis. We did as much as we could, as quickly as we could. Some things worked, some things didn't work. It's more of a self-reflection than a criticism, but I think that we have the opportunity to learn from the last time and do it better this time. My preference would be to hold off and do it strategically. But if there is an interest to move forward, I would at least suggest, if we do the 900,000, if that's going to be the approach, do it 900,000 and don't have the zip code requirement, because the reopening grants did not have the zip code requirements. I think by virtue of LEDC running this program, the targeted outreach is going to go towards those businesses. And by virtue of the fact that it's a relatively small amount of money and highly restrictive in terms of the revenues, we're already putting in place, those protections. And again, I totally appreciate Councilmember Joando's focus here. I know the original goal and the thought is, based on race, which legally there are issues there. There's national data to support that we believe is likely in the county that would reflect it. But if we're going to say that we're repurposing the 900,000 because that was business money intended for small businesses that desperately need it, then I don't think that we should further restrict it to only certain businesses. And would note, and I would just say that many of the restrictions that we put in place on the PHED program and on others, we have since learned as we've reviewed it that in our best of intentions to place more and more restrictions to try to target it to the right folks who desperately needed it, that ended up making it more prohibitive for the very people and businesses we were trying to help. And it's clear that the easier you make the program and the better outreach that you do, which I believe LEDC is really well positioned to do that. I have more I don't know that I would agree on this if LEDC wasn't on board, quite honestly, just based on capacity and other administrative questions and what everybody is doing. But that would be my suggested approach if we're going to move this forward without waiting for the ARPA funds and a more comprehensive approach.
All right, I think that's so let's just make sure we understand what we're talking about here. So the Councilmember Joando's proposal, the executive branch is recommending that we turn to LEDC to implement it. We have had major implementation challenges, not to be critical of anyone, but it's extremely difficult to build these systems rapidly and to implement them flawlessly. And so, I think wisely the executive branch has said, let's turn to our partner and build their capacity and leverage their capacity. And so have LEDC. It also gives me a lot of confidence, and it gives me a lot of, it really builds my interest in the program for sure, just to know that we are providing support through a partner that is foundational, I think, to the small business economy, in the county, and especially to our minority-owned small business economy here. And and the fact that you're already implementing some of the technical assistance programs, that's terrific. That blends in nicely. So I guess, hear what Councilmember Juano has to say about that. There are a number of changes in the packet, and we have to turn off this. We're going to have to adjourn in about 7 minutes here. 12:25 for the executive's press conference. They have to turn the feed over, and so as you know, no longer.
Yeah.
But so we have to address a number of specific recommendations from the executive branch that are in the packet if we're going to forward this on.
Sure. So just to, what is it?
Summarize
Councilmember Friedson office says, snatch the consensus out of the jaws of defeat. I think, is that the line?
Yeah, or conflict. Yeah,
or
exactly.
Conflict,
Exactly.
So,
so use the money that has been identified as available for reopening grants for the purposes of this program, with any technical, procedural changes that have been recommended that we, agree to, that are necessary. But remove the zip code restrictions, and I think it already sounded like we were going to remove the racial restrictions, despite our, our goals there under the auspices that the purpose of LEDC administering this program is specifically to do the outreach. And I do believe, particularly when you're removing the racial dynamics for legal reasons, there are a lot of minority-owned businesses in areas outside of those zip codes, even from folks who live in those zip codes but have businesses in other parts of the county, and particularly since we're using the reopening funds, I think it's a better dynamic to say we're going to focus it, we're going to target, but we're not going to restrict.
So just to be clear, I am fine with that. I did not. The zip codes was not my idea. I didn't want zip codes. I wanted it.
Sorry, I didn't mean replace it because you didn't suggest that. You suggest something that we're told. That
no, it was a second choice, because we couldn't do again, it wasn't just minority owned, it was women owned, disabled, and people of color businesses. I think that would be better, because I know several businesses, as you said, because of the marketplace, that are outside of the zip codes that are women minority owned. And again, this was just a prioritization. I was okay with it because it wasn't a restriction. It wasn't saying you couldn't apply. It was just a prioritization. But I'm fine removing both. And I've gotten assurances from Mr. Rivas's team and Mr. Fletcher, and I will be pushing the heck out of it myself as far as a robust outreach and marketing effort to get it to the folks. And I think if you look in the packet, the fact that, the Montgomery County specific data we do have, the 60% of businesses in the 2012 survey that have 1 to 4 employees, just by nature of having 1 to 4 employees, means you're going to roughly have less than $500,000 in income. That's 60% of the businesses in the county. And I think so. There's 27,000 in 2012. It's probably higher now. So I think that will narrow it in and of itself. And so I am fine with that. And then just to your point, Mr. Reamer, the questions so that we can get it done today, ideally, that I'm fine with all the recommendations. We just handled 2 of them. We're going to remove zip codes. We're going to remove women owned and people of color owned. And then there are several other issues in here about deleting requirements so that they don't have to show loss of income. They just have to show a lease. I'm fine with all of those requirements. I think they're pretty standard.
Okay, I did want to comment on that one. It's okay. So to shift towards, you don't have to show a loss of income. You just have to be a business with a lease.
And make less than $500,000.
Make less than $500,000. We need to have.
And be retail and service oriented.
Retail. Okay. At this point now, because we are no longer targeting this money at businesses that have lost funding. We're saying any business with a lease that has less than 500,000 is eligible. We've got to have some.
Could I make a suggestion here? Could we include something about the businesses being shut down due to public health directives, either from the state and or from the county?
That's a good point.
So it would be a proxy. We're just assuming that you have revenue. If we shut you down, the likelihood is you had revenue losses, unless you were the most innovative business that was able to pivot overnight and not lose business when we shut you down.
That's a possibility. Another approach here would be, I mean, what we want is economic development impact. And I feel like LEDC would know how to target the funds for businesses that are, you know, have the potential to expand but we've got to have something here. I'm not actually not sure about whether because who was shut down that wasn't also a restaurant? I guess retail they weren't ever shut down. They were only had their
capacity limited.
Reduced. But we've got to have some kind of vision other than any business with a lease that's less than 500 is now eligible for a grant. That's not enough guidance.
There's more conversation here, but their personal care, I mean, some of the services that Councilmember Jawando noted in the beginning, specifically, you know, which was not an exhaustive list, admittedly, but I can tell you several of those businesses that were noted, I believe actually all the ones that you mentioned were shut down for a period of
maybe
time.
That's all right.
So, you know, I think we need to think a little bit through, you know, not, you know, we don't want to cast it too narrowly, but I think we need to have something here. I mean, it's a huge category and a very small amount of money comparatively.
If using that restriction doesn't result in a, you know, and like too small of a narrow set of businesses, then that will be fine. I think that gets to the intent.
Yeah.
I just think it's got to be something other than any business, you know.
Well, that's why we put the loss in there, but I think it probably is a little narrower, but also targeted to do what Councilmember Friedsen's proposing of you had, you know, your capacity was limited as a result. But I don't know a retail business that didn't have an impact.
So let's ask LEDC to do some thinking about this and follow up with us as this goes to full council.
Okay.
You know, for what they would recommend, some language in there so that the county's funding will be used for the maximum impact.
Yeah, the key on both sides, you remember, just from what we've learned from these business grants, I've worked on just about all of them, and you know, there's lessons learned. You know, we're in a crisis. We're figuring it out as we go, but it needs to be really clear on who is eligible and very easy to administer for LEDCs. I think getting their input on how to make that work, and I will say, the more challenging the proof is, the harder it is for the very people you're trying to target. I know that it's always well intended, but we have learned, you know, as we kind of discussed early, that sometimes the speed bumps to try to protect people end up, you know, keeping it puts up a fence accidentally to the people you want to access.
And that's why we removed it.
Understood. So we've got a consensus here, but we are going to get some more follow-up. We'll have staff to follow up with LEDC. We'll get some language from them as to how they would frame this, and then we'll have that accompany our recommendation to the full council. I think we're all in agreement, show of hands.
Yeah, could I just quickly, I know we're out of time, but can we just get a verification of the exact dollar amount, you know, that is left available from reopening, and then have the language to allow 10% to be used for LEDC, just to make sure we clarify like what the number is before we go back to full council. I mean, I said 900,000, but that was just based on a loose, rough number. So I just think we have to like hone in on that exact number, and then we can supplement it, you know, later with ARPA funds and others, you know, if it's successful and that's part of the comprehensive strategy.
Awesome.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
In order to grow their business and anything else, access to market, networking, everything they need.
Many of the volunteers that I interviewed at the Volunteer Center were concerned because they had never owned their own businesses. What type of volunteers are you looking for, and do they need that specific skills? Do they need to have owned their own business or run a business?
Yes, so it's definitely preferably if they have a business or they had, but it's not mandatory because a lot of other people that work in other fields and industry, they do have the knowledge about how business is run in the United States. And this we're talking because we train a lot of immigrants and refugees. They need that guidance, right? They need somebody to brainstorm. They need somebody to look over that mission to see if it's